or am I not? Yeah, I am, although I've got to get that onto there. And so we're going to actually get into the mechanics now of how to do that safe system assessment. These first three modules have been ensuring that we understand the safe system philosophy, that we're able to use that to make these assessments and come up with meaningful recommendations, because it's all about enhancing our application of the safe system on the road network and in the operation of the road network. And so you really got to have your head around that. And we've been using that to do that exposure, likelihood, and severity categorization, get our head really around that, and you'll see why that's so important shortly. So this whole module is about preparing you to go out to that site, which Kathy pointed you at last session, but we'll go through this at the end as well, and be able to do this mock safe system assessment. And it is I call it a mock one because we've trimmed a whole lot off it that is just time consuming, that we don't want you to be spending days and days and days doing this assignment. We just want to be assured that you understand the key principles of it and you're able to sort of get into that. So we're recording this one as per usual. So what I'm going to do in this session is point you at some guidelines on safe system assessments that are available to assist you going forward. Show you how to complete that safe system assessment matrix. And I talk about the matrix a bit. Some of you might have no idea what I'm talking about. Some of you might have played around with it, but don't worry, I'll go from assuming people don't have any knowledge of it all the way through. What to do in terms of the reporting, what we actually produce as a report that you'd hand over to a client if you're doing a safe system assessment for them. And then we're going to spend some time talking about this categorization of primary safe system treatments versus supporting safe system treatments. Some of you might have had a bit of exposure to that in recent road safety auditing, because that's now integrated into road safety auditing. But some of you, again, may have not heard of these terms, so we'll go from a very base level. Keep an eye out for Wallies as usual. So we've nicely done that. We'll look at the safe system philosophy. Human bodies are vulnerable, people make mistakes, shared responsibility. We've got these elements of the safe system. I think we're all quite comfortable about it. We've got this aspiration of zero death and serious injury, nice philosophical way of thinking about the management of a transport system. So we're all good on that. And then we got into this real thinking about, okay, how do we make decisions on the ground about alignment with safe system principles and risk. And we looked at that exposure, that likelihood, that severity, and then we just did lots of practice of categorizing. So important. When we were talking about that severity, we really started honing in on some specifics in terms of biomechanics of injury, forces that humans can handle, different crash types, the energy involved in them, the energy transfer in those. We looked at these sorts of curves, and we sort of did a bit of a line somewhere around this 10% and saying about that 30 for pedestrians, 50 for side impact, 70 for head on are our general safe system tolerable levels. We looked at some different tables like this, and I'm putting these at the start of these slides again because you will be expected to be referring back to these and thinking about these in your assessment of severity of crash in your safe system assessment. But we did give you that nice colorful chart to even help you further in that. And so I've put a few of these in there. But that colorful chart, which I'll show later on in today's module again, is going to be a real great reference point for the severity of crash. Okay, so how to do a safe system assessment now. Let's have a little poll though about who's got some experience with it, who hasn't, and no prerequisites to have any experience with this, but we may or may not have a poll pop up soon. No? Okay, poll.
Sorry, Ken.
That's okay. Thank you. So, should be up on your screen. What has been your involvement with safe system assessments? Nothing. Safe system what now? I've heard of the term, but don't know much more. I've had one done on one of my projects, or I've done one where I live, breathe, and eat safe system assessments. So this gives just an idea of where we're at. As I say, no expectation for anything here, but it's just nice to get a gauge of where we're at.
Sorry, I got too trigger happy there and I've ended it already, but we almost had everyone.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Right. So we've got people sort of heard, a fair few have had them done on their projects, and that's good. That shows the sort of reach we're starting to get with safe system assessments out there, and the people getting them done on their projects and hopefully adding value. Somebody's done one, and somebody lives, breathes, and eats safe system assessments. That's excellent. I love it. Good. Okay, let's get rid of that. And let's jump into talking about how we do. So the Safe System Assessment Framework by Austroads 2016 document is available, freely available off Austroads website, of course, like every Austroads document. It's all free, all the guides and everything like that. You just need to create yourself a login and then download to your heart's content. But we've also put it into the learning management system. Now that gives you a nice run through on the safe system assessment process at a kind of high level. It gives a bit of detail, but since its release, there's been a lot of people doing safe system assessments and refining this process and changing bits and fixing stuff and the like. So there's a slight difference between industry practice, or there's ways that just aren't clarified within this document that have sort of started to happen, and I'm going to take you through some of those. So I was on the working group for this document. I wasn't one of the authors of it, but there was a lot of good thinking in there. We were doing a thing called a safe system audit before this, but and they took some of that thinking and they plunked it into this. It was not called a safe system audit with this release because didn't want to confuse road safety audits with safe system assessments and this different process. It's an interesting thing, but it's really to try to help those projects and people trying to make those decisions. How do I get the best alignment with safe system principles on the ground with real practical decisions, and give me some quantification. Don't give me airy fairy principles of the safe system and zero death and serious injury and human bodies are vulnerable and no, give us concrete stuff, give us answers, and that's what this does. And it's broken into these 4 sections, and it really starts to talk first of all when you're doing an assessment about understanding the assessment's objective and why are we doing the assessment, what scale of assessment are we doing, and what's the scale of the what's the scale of the assessment, what's the depth of the assessment, because you can be very broad and you can go into a huge amount of detail in assessments, or you can be very sort of light and do a quicker assessment. Now, this is one of the things that has been clarified a bit in operational practice and jurisdictional specifics and guidelines, which I'll take you through, but understanding that first is important. Then the project, whatever's being looked at, what's this project and what's the objectives of the project? What's the function of the road, the speed environment, road users, vehicles? What's the movement and place categorization of the area? Getting a feel for this project, that's going to help when you come to making recommendations and a little bit in terms of making this assessment. But the next one is the matrix, the Safe System Assessment Matrix. And I always call this the meat of a safe system assessment. This is really where you're spending your time. And that's actually what we're going to make you spend your time on, that and a little bit on the treatments. but you can see their exposure likelihood and severity, other elements or other pillars of the SAFE system, so some thinking around that. Then you make recommendations of alterations to the project to get better alignment with SAFE system principles, and we categorize those into how effective they are at helping us implement the SAFE system. I'm going to take you through all of that, but I do want to say that, as I have already said, is that 2 jurisdictions have released their own guidelines. Let's call them supplements to the Austroads document. But what they've done is said, hey, there's great information in this Austroads document, but it's missing a whole lot of stuff. It's also, there's some things we see in there we don't quite particularly agree with that practice. Here's how we're going to specifically do this. And then, as I showed you last module, we at Safe System Solutions, in trying to get industry upskilled in this and out there doing lots of safe system assessments, have identified, even under these, some gaps that we've tried to fill with interim fact sheets. So lots of documents available to you. These 2 documents, the one from the Victorian government and the one from the South Australian government, are pretty much the same. Okay, so there was sort of general consensus that's a good way of operating. And a lot of other jurisdictions, in fact, all jurisdictions seem to be generally following this process. Queensland's done a little bit of extra work behind the scenes and created some spin-off documentation and spreadsheets of that. It's not public. However, TMR does have that. It sits within the Safer Roads team. So if you're in Queensland or you're working for the Queensland government, it's worth making sure that you try to get some of that stuff just to ensure that you're following their exact mold. Now, the general principles of everything they're doing are the same as what I'm going to go through. There's just like little variances and tweaks that they do. I'm not going to go into detail on the Queensland specific model. Everybody else follows generally this model, including New Zealand and certainly New South Wales. Western Australia just don't even attempt to do safe system assessments over there. Well, you can. The West Australian government have a completely different way of thinking and operating around all of this, as they do in many things. But always happy to talk to people about that. And if you've got a particular jurisdiction you're working in, how to present stuff, their standard templates and everything like that. Okay. So what I'm doing here is starting with the end product, which is one particular section of a safe system assessment that people will be hoping to see. And this is the thing that the executive directors or the project directors or the project review committee or the regional review committee are looking for often. They want to see this graph. They want to see the graph. And this graph, let me explain it, and then I'll show you how to build this. So what we've got here is these red bars they are the existing conditions. So you're always going to start with existing conditions. So there's no project, the intersection or the length of road or whatever it is. It's what it is currently now. And that gets scored. Then you come up with as many design options as they give you. And so it looks like for this one, they've got a roundabout design option. They've got a modified T intersection with traffic signals. They've got a T intersection with traffic signals. They've got 3 options here that they could upgrade this intersection with. And then each of those gets scored on their own merits. And you can see here that we've got some crash types: runoff road, head-on, intersection, other, crashes involving pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. And in a safe system assessment, you can see here, it's in brackets under here, lower scores are better. Lower scores are better. So think of it as risk score. Lower risk is better, okay? And so the lower each of these, the better. And so you can immediately start to see where your risks lie, what's improving, what's not. Okay, so we're going to now show how we build that, and then maybe how we interpret it and how we improve on it. Do keep your questions coming in as we go. I'm going to run through quite a bit here, but this is really important because you're going to have to apply this straight after this session in your actual assignment. The first thing you have to do within a safe system assessment is understand that project. Okay, what's the area? What are they doing? What's the existing road? What's the movement of place categorization? What commitments have they made in terms of, I don't know, speed limits or other things? Are there schools in the area? What's the land use? What's the growth happening? What's the traffic modeling? Gather information, understand the project. Austroads gave these prompt questions. So this is straight out of the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework. And my little practical tip here is what I do as soon as anybody asks for a safe system assessment is that I send them these questions, usually in a Word document, and say, can you please answer these as best you can, or send me any background reports, documents, traffic studies, land use, or point me at websites or whatever it is. Like, they are the experts on this project. They've done the planning of the thinking of it and all like that. Give me all of this. Here's some questions that help. You may also like to do this in a workshop with them and have that initial workshop and even get into a bit of the scoring and thinking with them. But you can really understand that. I mean, back when we used to do things in person, I used to love getting in a room, rolling out the roll plot of the design, standing around it, asking lots of questions, really gathering that intel about the project and the thinking behind it. So you've got to gather that information. You've got to get your head around the project. Now, for your assignment, we're not actually going to go through this. The reason for that is it can be a bit time consuming reading, reports, gathering this and understanding and those sort of things. Also, some of you will get hypothetical designs and things like that, where there is none of this background thinking. Okay. Some of you will get real projects where there is this background thinking somewhere, but we don't necessarily have access to it or the like. So for your assignment, don't worry too much about, we don't worry at all about this section, but for real safe system assessments, you really need to understand that. You do a little bit of documenting of it in the reporting as well to show others that you've got your head around it and give that context. But after you've done all of that thinking, you're pretty much going to be jumping into doing a safe system assessment matrix of the existing conditions, what's currently out. Okay, and this is the matrix. Okay, the matrix being just a table, different name for a sort of table, you'll see there, has 3 rows: exposure, likelihood, and severity. That makes sense now why we've been banging on about those exposure, likelihood, and severity, I hope. And the crash types on the top there are the ones that you saw in that bar graph there: runoff road, head-on, intersection, other, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. So I think some of these crash types make a lot of sense to you. And certainly if you're somebody who's been doing black spot investigations, crash reduction studies, crash investigations and the like, you'll be very comfortable with these. But you have to think of this as a crash type, a crash code, essentially. So runoff road, head-on, and intersection, these are for vehicles. So it could be cars and trucks, okay? So those are vehicles. Pedestrians are crashes where pedestrians are the ones that are injured. Cyclists, the same. Crashes where cyclists are the ones that are injured, and motorcyclists injured. So if potentially a motorbike hits a pedestrian and the pedestrian is injured, we'll call that a pedestrian crash. If a vehicle runs off the road and hits a pedestrian and it's the pedestrian that's injured, okay, it's a pedestrian crash. Even though, it was a run-off road, but we put it into that pedestrian category. Now, if they ran off the road and hit something else and it was like the vehicle occupant injured, then it'd be the run-off road crash. It may be both. Now, I'm talking about crashes, but you're going to be predicting these. These are crashes you're forecasting in your mind, you're predicting. If somebody runs off the road in a car, in your prediction, you imagine this, okay, they run off the road, it's within the intersection. They're going to come around here and they're going to run off the road. Okay, is that an intersection crash or a run-off road crash? It's a run-off road crash, okay? Because the intersection crash is when two vehicles crash and there's some sort of intersection aspect to it. Now, so what I'm trying to differentiate here is head-on within an intersection versus an intersection crash. So there's got to be some sort of either turning maneuver happening or straight throughs happening in order for it to be an intersection crash. Because if you had a vehicle coming through here and a vehicle going through here and they were both going straight through and one of them, drifted out of their lane, that's head on. Okay, so I hope that's sort of clarifying. If you are somebody who's done crash studies and crash black spot studies and all, just think about it like you're coding a crash. We do put usually DCA codes or RUM codes if you're in other jurisdictions. So some DCA codes, definition for classifying accidents, or RUM, road user movement codes. New South Wales uses RUM, and but most are using DCA definition classification. That's where we put a code to a crash type, and you don't need to do that. You don't need to code them for a safe system assessment, but you need to think about it in that mold of what's the crash, what's the injury, what's the crash mechanism, and where would it fit in this categorization. Okay. So what we do is then we look at each one of these cells of the matrix, each one of these squares, and we aim to put within this to put I'm trying to get rid of some of my scribbles because I know there's a lot more scribble to come. There we go. What we're aiming to do is put a number into each of these cells of the matrix. And the number should be between 0 and 4 for each cell here. So how on earth do we do that? Well, you can see for the exposure, it looks like a lot of AADTs or numbers of pedestrians, number of cyclists, number of motorcyclists. And you started to do that thinking, but it makes it really easy and clear here because you see there, it's saying AADT. Now, AADT being annual average daily traffic, and you may be given that. I hope you'll be given that for a project. So what's the AADT? And they'll say, well, it's 2,000 vehicles a day, or it's 50,000 vehicles a day, or whatever it is. But 2,000 vehicles a day is not between 0 and 4, is it? So how do we take that 2,000 vehicles a day and make that into a score between 0 and 4? Well, you go to the Austroads Safe System Assessment Scoring Reference Sheet. Okay, I've reproduced that here, but you'll find that straight out of the Austroads guide. And it says, okay, scores 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it gives you then road user exposure. Okay. Let's start with a 1. I'll come back to 0. Volume of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are particularly low. Therefore, exposure is low. For run-off road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT is less than 1,000. For pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists, it's less than 10 vehicles a day. Okay, right, we've got some numbers. We've got something to latch onto. Let's go up a bit further. What are we talking about for a 2? Volumes of vehicles in crash type is moderate, between 1,000 and 5,000, between 10 and 50, for pedestrian, cyclists, and motorcyclists. What's a 3? Between 5,000 and 10,000, and a 4 above 10,000 vehicles a day. So if you are given traffic volumes, it's pretty clear cut as to what you're going to do. Now, if you're looking at project designs, okay, you pretty much use the existing traffic volumes, unless you've got some growth predictions or traffic prediction modeling that may alter that. You can take that into account. But you're really taking the traffic volume, looking at the scoring reference sheet here, and then making your call. So we said, what did we say? We said 2,000 vehicles a day. Well, 2,000 vehicles a day is between 1,000 and 5,000. So the score we're going to be putting into the matrix there is a 2. Okay. That is the volume of vehicles exposed to run-off road crashes. Head-on is going to be the same. Okay, now the only way head-on would not be the same as this would be if there was some sort of physical rigid barrier system separating it, or it was a one-way system potentially. Okay, but most of the time it's going to be exactly the same as run-off road. Then we get to intersections. Now you may have an assessment of a stretch that doesn't have any intersections, and in which case you would put a 0 because there is no exposure. Okay, it says that here. There's no exposure to a certain crash type as a 0. Okay, that would be no intersections. But if you have an intersection, what you have to do is take that 2,000 and add whatever volume is coming from the side road. Okay, so let's say that there's another 1,000 vehicles coming in off this side road. Okay, so we've got 2,000 and another 1,000 there, so we're to 3,000 now. And we go back to our scoring reference sheet and we say, well, where does that fit? Okay, is it a 1? Less than 1,000? No. Is it a 2? 2,000. Okay, it still sits within 2. We haven't got enough exposure to jump us to the next score. So we're going to stick with a 2 there. Okay, so we're into a 2. Then we've got this interesting category of other. And what does that mean? Well, this is your ability to identify crash types that haven't been represented in any of these other crash types. And what could those be? They could be rear end crashes, because that's not identified here in any of the others. A little trick with rear end crashes: if the rear end crash has been caused by intersection queuing or the like, we actually attribute that to intersection. That was a clarification made by the Victorian government, which others seem to have adopted for now. That if you can say, well, it's actually this is queuing from that intersection, and the rear ends are happening from that. But if the rear end's happening mid-block or the like, it would sit in other. Crashes at level crossings, so crashes with trains, crashes with animals. These are things that aren't quite captured in any of these others. So you would define that, you would write that down, and then you would make a call on what the volume of traffic exposed to that crash type is. So let's call it a 2 again, because we're saying, okay, maybe with crashes with animals or whatever it is. Okay, then we get into pedestrians and we say, what is the exposure of pedestrians to these crashes? So you want to know the pedestrian number. How many pedestrians are crossing? How many pedestrians are walking along this stretch? But this becomes one where it's a little bit problematic. Most projects, I find, have wonderful data available for you in AADT, percentage heavy vehicles and all of this. And you go, what's your pedestrian volume? They're like, I don't know. And you go, okay. They don't have pedestrian counts. Then what you need to do is make a judgment call based on your knowledge or the information they give you. Maybe you get them to predict. You say, oh, well, is it a highly populated pedestrian area? Or you go out there on site, which you're going to have to do anyway, and you observe and you see and you make a judgment call. And so you're in there, and this is probably where you're going to start maybe using these. Are you thinking it's low volume of pedestrians? Are you thinking it's moderate volume of pedestrians, high volume of pedestrians, very high volume of pedestrians? They have given you some guidance, 10 to 50, 50 to 100, greater than 100 crossing in the day. They're sort of general guides unless you've actually got counts. So you might say, okay, well, the pedestrians are, I think, there's hardly any pedestrians out here. It's a rural area. There's not much. I haven't seen any pedestrians in the time I've been out here. I walked around and, maybe occasionally there's one that, walks along here for some exercise from that farm area or whatever, but I'm going to go with 1. So we're talking less than 10 pedestrians. All right, then you go to cyclists and you do the same thing. And the cyclists are using those same units per day. They're using the same thing there. So you're thinking exactly the sort of same way, and you go, oh, okay, no, again, not a commuter cyclist route. There might be occasional recreational cyclists out in this area, but it's really, low. So I'm going to go 1 for that. Then you go, what about motorcyclists? And again, sometimes road authorities can help you out with some motorcycle data. Often they can't. And so you often just take a arbitrary 1% of AADT, 1 to 2% of AADT. So let's do that. We'll just go with 2 for that as well. Okay, so we've got some numbers on our exposure to crashes. So that's pretty good. Fairly happy with that. And it's all been nice and relatively clear cut if you're given traffic volumes, and if you are given pedestrian or cyclist and motorcycle volumes, fairly clear cut as well. If not, you're making some predictions and estimations and you're popping that in. Okay.
Can we jump in with a couple of questions, please, Ken?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. What do you do with different AADT on each leg for the score? And if you don't mind, can I share my screen?
Yep. Thank you. Yep, can see it.
Oh, do you want me to explain it?
Oh, yeah, I thought I was waiting. I was like, oh.
I just figured this would help explain.
Yeah.
Sorry. So
well, what Kathy wants to say is,
thank you, Ken.
We prepared a fact sheet on this because it's a very good question and it is asked by many people. So here's our fact sheet. And what we want to do, as I sort of briefly mentioned there, is we want to add up the two scores. So if you scroll down a little bit, Kathy, you see a hypothetical intersection there with 9,000 vehicles a day on the main drag as an AADT, 1,000 vehicles on the day on the side road. And so we'll take that as a 10,000 vehicles per day. There has been debate in industry about this, lots of people jumping around and talking about a whole lot of different things. The Victorian government sort of has adopted this as a practice for now until somebody, Austroads or others, come out with something different. So that's how it's thought about.
The next question is about, is the AADT based on existing conditions volume, or do we need to factor in traffic growth over a certain period?
Yeah, so another really excellent question. If you, I don't think we did a fact sheet on this. So what you want to do is compare the existing conditions to basically day one opening. Now, if they say to you, okay, we've got 5-year, 20-year and 50-year traffic modelling, and we want you to use those, okay, still do the day one scoring and then do those as scenarios, okay? The reason for that is it's not fair to compare that from a risk perspective compared to the existing conditions, okay? So you'll do those as isolated assessments in their own right and label them accordingly. The challenges you sometimes get are latent demand. So like there's no crossing on this road and the project is to build a crossing. Okay, you build it, they will come, they will cross there. Okay, so how do you account for that difference? So you need to make a little bit of a judgment call on that. I would often say I'm going to take the same volume. So if I predict that many will cross, I will take that and use that for existing conditions because the demand there to cross is that. But yeah, there's a little bit of grey area sort of in that. And I think a question just came in there on greenfield sites. Okay, so we don't have any existing conditions. What are you meant to do on that? On that, you actually just use your prediction as there is no base level, there is no base scoring. You just do the predicted traffic volume, and you're not going to have a greenfields development or a new absolute greenfields road without having some prediction of the use of that by road users. So you'll be able to peg that back to something and you use that. If it's a greenfield bypass though, for example, that's a slightly different one. So if you've got a highway that runs through a town and then you're going to bypass that town, or the project's going to bypass that town, you can use and you should use the volume and all of the risk associated with going through the town, and then compare that to utilising a bypass. We'll get to that.
And one more question. Would an incident between a vehicle exiting a driveway and a vehicle on the carriageway be an other crash?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, that's good. Exactly what point you decide that that's actually an intersection because it's such a big driveway, a massive service center complex exiting is not actually defined. Private property or not, probably not the greatest one, but yeah, driveways and those sorts of things certainly fit into that other category. Cool. Okay, let's go. Let's do this likelihood one. So this group was quite good in their analysis of likelihood throughout, really got that down pat. And you can see some dot points here on some of the things that you may be thinking about for likelihood of crash. So for runoff road, speed, geometry, shoulders, barriers, offset to hazard, delineation, etc. Lighting, surface conditions, all of that sort of stuff, influencing the chance that this crash could happen. And so what you do is in that cell of the matrix, you actually start to dot point out factors, things that you've seen out there in the existing conditions that influence the likelihood of crashes. So there's much more writing and words that go into this one. And you're dot pointing lots of ideas. High speed. Okay, it's a geometric, or it's a straight alignment. Okay, it's got sealed shoulders, got audio tactile edge lines. So you're dot pointing this. The surface condition's good, delineation's good. Oh, it's high speed though, and it's got this. And then you go to your scoring reference sheet again and say, well, what advice are we getting here? Let's have a look at a 1 again. 1, crash likelihood. It is highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Okay. Go up another one. It is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Gee, we're not getting much information here, are we? We're not getting much help from our scoring reference sheet. Sort of 3 years. It is likely that a given crash type. Okay, 4 seems to have more words here. The likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high, given the infrastructure in place. High approach speeds to a sharp curve, priority movement control filtering across several lanes of opposing lanes, high speed. Okay, we've got a bit more of an idea. We do have a scoring fact sheet on likelihood and how to think about this, because it is subjective. Okay, this is where you are going to be using your knowledge and your judgment. But what we make this point that it is a relative score, a relative likelihood. If you took this at absolute face value, everything would be highly unlikely because crashes are rare. Okay, so what you're doing is you're saying, what are the characteristics of this intersection or this length of road that increase its likelihood of crashes relative to other areas? Speeds, lack of lighting, confusing alignment, see-through effects, dynamic visual obstruction, surface issues, all of these things factoring into play. Now, a 0 for likelihood is almost never given because you're factoring in, the fact that humans are still going to make mistakes and the like. I don't know if I've ever used a 0 for likelihood. So what you do is you dot point a whole lot of things in here. Dot, 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 dot. Here are the factors. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm noticing. And then you make your judgment call. You sort of justified it with all your dot points of where you're going to go. So, you might decide, okay, it's unlikely that a given crash type will occur. So it's unlikely that runoff road. We've got sealed shoulders, we've got audio tactile edge line, we've got lighting, we've got a nice straight alignment. Everything's looking fairly good there, but it's high speed, and maybe it's out a couple of hours from major townships, so people might be fatigued and people falling asleep. So I'm going to go with a 2. 2 being that it's sort of unlikely that a given crash type will occur, but it's certainly still going to be happening. Then you do the same then to head on. Okay, so it's going to take a lot of the similar factors, isn't it? But it's also going to, well, what's our separation between these vehicles? Have we got a wide center line? Have we got tactiles in the center? We've got some paddles. Is there an actual barrier system? Is the barrier system enough for us to say that there's actually no exposure? Usually I would, be reluctant to say 0 for head-on crash exposure with a wire rope safety barrier system, for example, because I go, well, the chance of somebody penetrating that barrier is low, but it still exists because we know, most wire rope systems are designed to contain a 2-ton pickup truck or a 10-ton vehicle, and we know we've got lots of higher speed vehicles and that, and particular things and stuff like that. But it's very unlikely that people are going to get through that. So maybe I'll go with a 1 if it had that, and maybe if it's got separation, I say, well, okay, now there's nothing physical there, but there's lots of these other elements, and so anyway, so maybe you end up with a 2 for that. So you can see there's some subjectivity to it, but you do justify it by dot pointing out a whole lot of things. Then you go to intersection and you're doing the same thing. Okay, what's the intersection? What's the type of control? Is it a passively controlled give way, or does it have traffic signals, or is it a roundabout? What's the speed? What's the design like? Are there see-through effects? How many conflict points are we seeing? Is it visible? Is it obvious? Is there lighting? Is it well? Is it well channelized? Does it have turn lanes and these sorts of things? So you're factoring all of that in, and then you're using your same things to make that call: unlikely, likely, and the like. And so maybe you go, well, I'm going to go with a 3 on that, because I think that there's some issues there. It's passively controlled, so it's got a give way sign only. It's sort of not that obvious that it's there, and I've got some concerns with this and that. So it's sort of how you go. And then you continue to do that for all of them. When you get to pedestrians, you're thinking about, well, what pedestrian facilities are there? Is there crossing? Is there nothing? What's the, are there refuges? How many conflict points? What's the speed of vehicles coming in here? Now, you do not think about the number of pedestrians crossing there, because that's already been factored in. Remember, in a hypothetical here, I was saying, well, there's hardly any pedestrians and the like, and there's a rural area. So you're probably going to have a high likelihood score, because there's probably not going to have been facilities built there, are there? Why would we build a pedestrian? Why would somebody have invested in a pedestrian crossing or the like? Because in this area where there's no pedestrians at all, or hardly any pedestrians. Okay, so you're probably going to end up going with a 4 on something like that. A maximum, because it's saying for that pedestrian that is there trying to cross, what's their likelihood? And it's high. And same for cyclists and motorcyclists. Well, you make that judgment call based on all these things, and I won't go into that into detail. But then you do that. And then you go, okay, now time to look at severity. So we're now not thinking about how many people are exposed to this. We're not thinking about the chance that this crash happens. We're now saying it's happening. How bad is it going to be? We go back to our scoring reference sheet. We have a look. So let's take a 1. What does it say for a 1? Should a crash occur, it is highly unlikely that it will result in fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are fairly low during a crash, or the majority are effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. Okay, let's have a look what a 2 is. Should a crash occur, it is unlikely that a result in fatality or serious injury. Kinetic energy is moderate. Majority are effectively dissipated. Should a crash occur, it is likely that it'll result in fatality or serious injury. Kinetic energies are moderate and are not effective. So, and then a 4, should a crash occur, highly likely. Okay, so this one, we've got a little bit more science and evidence behind it. This is where you'll be referring back to this scoring guidance severity sheet that we produced to try to help people try to get more consistency across industry in some of this. And you can see here, we've got these different crash types that you're imagining and you're predicting. Okay, and then we've got the speed that's happening. And then you are able to sort of say, oh, okay, well, we've got a pole, a tree, car impact, and it's happening at, I don't know, probably potentially up at 100 or 90 kilometers per hour. Okay, I'm going to be talking about a 4 for that, aren't I? No, there's a bit of grading and, you know, judge even says it at the bottom here. General indication only, professional judgment required. You're making the judgment calls, but it's helping you a little bit along the way. We go back to our example, we've decided it's high speed, okay, and we're thinking about now, doesn't matter how many people are exposed, doesn't matter what the chance of them coming off the road, because now we're thinking just about the severity. They've come off the road, they're off the road. What are they going to hit? You know, we're talking about trees, couples, are we talking about a barrier system? They're going to run along that. What's the speed that they're going? You know, what are these features? And so there's no barriers. We're ignoring the fact that we've got audio, tactile, and sealed shoulders and those sort of things, because the crash is now happening in our mind, and they're hitting the tree at 100 or 90 kilometers per hour. We're putting a 4 there. Okay. Head on. Okay, maybe head-ons are one of the crash types. We can take higher speeds, we can absorb more energy. We know that that's generally okay at some speeds, but is it enough? So we've got head-on car versus car. It's right up there, and 78. Okay, we're still probably in our 4 categorization area, even for that. Okay, so we're probably going 4 there. Intersection, I picked an example of a sort of high 100 kilometer per hour road, so everything's basically going to come out at 4. Any incident traveling at 100 kilometers an hour, unless we're hitting barrier systems and running along those, or there's things to reduce the operating speed, are going to be fairly severe. But if it was different, obviously you could alter it. So you go through and you can make these calls. But I'm going to put a 4 on all of these, actually. 4, 4, 4, 4. Now, cyclists, because we're saying now a cyclist is involved in a crash with passenger vehicle at 100 kilometers an hour, it's going to be bad. So probably I haven't quite used an example where you'd get lots of variation, but you could imagine this on a 60 kilometer per hour road where you'd go, well, head on, if that's going to happen, well, maybe we're down at a 2 for a head on. If the intersection form was roundabouts or a raised intersection, maybe going a 1, because you go, well, actually, they're going through their really low speed. So when this happens, it's going to be, you can see how you can utilize it. So you've gone through all of this and you've got numbers. And again, in severity, you need to justify it with your dot points. It probably won't be as many dot points as the likelihood one, but you'll dot point it out. You'll say, well, speed's this, but speed limits this, but I think operating speed's a bit higher, and speeds through the conflict point are there. It might be this, and there's a high percentage of heavy vehicles here. So some of the, if anybody crashes into that, it's head-ons with heavy vehicles is going to be a little more severe. The barrier system's there. Okay, all the light posts are frangible, so they'll break away on impact, so that's less severe. All of these sort of factors, and you're jotting them down, and you come up with a score. So you've got these numbers now and some justification in. And what you do is you take those numbers and you multiply them. So you say 2 times 2 times 4. Okay, so we're into then a score of 16 for run-off road. 16 for head-on. And then we're able to go, well, okay, so we've got 4 to it, it's 24. And so on and so on. And you keep scoring them out. And what you then sort of discover is where your risks are lying. And what you can do is add up all of these scores along the bottom and get a final score out of 448. So the maximum score in each one would be 64. And your final score out of 448 is the addition of all of these crash types. So multiply this way and add, and then add across. Okay, I've sort of unleashed a lot of how you do the matrix on everybody there. I'll give you a little bit of a live example. I'm going to take our stretch break pretty soon. I'll cover off any questions on this, and then I'll show you an example, a mock-up, simplified example of how you sort of go through this thinking in a second. Kathy, any questions?
Thank you, Ken. Back on likelihood, can you compare the base existing against the options when looking at likelihood?
Yes, it's exactly what you'll do. And you'll see that when I show you the example. But what you do is you fill out this full matrix for the existing condition. Then you take that fully, the existing intersection, for example, what you see out there on site, you don't even look at the plans yet necessarily, and you okay, that's what it is now. Then you score all of that and you justify it and you put dot points in. Then you copy that and you paste it, and then you look at the plans, and then you modify this existing conditions matrix to what is being removed, what's being improved, how scores are coming down, what's changing, and you modify and alter that to show what improvement you're getting or what things are becoming worse.
Thank you, Ken. In your welcome packs, it wasn't just full of goodies. There were a couple of hard copy items in there, and they're the ones to really have a look at now. Hopefully, you've still got those. So there's a few key bits in there. Within each category, there are many possible crash types. For instance, through side impact crashes are likely to be more severe than through left crash type at an intersection due to the angle and speed. Do you take a score of the most severe or average?
You take the most severe. You do need to be a little bit flexible with that, but generally you take the most severe. So the reason you kind of, it's not an absolute definitive always take that one, but you have to do that. So imagine you have this highly problematic right turn with only a few people doing that, but the majority are doing the left out, for example. And you determine that the chance of this right turn against is really big. The lower volume doing that right turn out, and the left turn out is where there's lots doing it, but it's going to be slightly less severe for geometric reasons or the like. You really want to be highlighting that right in your assessment score, because in the end we want to be recommending things to address that and to address the speed of it and those sort of things. So that's how you are sort of highlighting it. But if you remember right back at the start when I said depth of assessment, this is where it slightly depends. I mean, 99% of safe system assessments will just sort of look at all of that, take that right turn against, utilize that as your major driver of likelihood and severity, and sort of plonk your scores in accordingly, and not get into too much excitement and detail of that. You could, and there may be a possibility that you go to a really detailed, in-depth assessment and you quadrant up your intersection and you create specific entities for those different crash types and score them accordingly. Then you may do a weighted average if you want it to come back to one intersection score. I've got a colleague who loves doing that sort of stuff, and he loves having like 17 spreadsheets running and doing weighted averages across scoring and the like. But it's not often required. I mean, what they're really wanting is, as an output, is to understand that specific risk of that intersection, which is dominated by that right turn. Hope that sort of makes sense. Any more questions?
Yes, thank you, Ken. I'm not the colleague with the 17 spreadsheets. Since this is an abstract assessment, how do you justify to others? 17 spreadsheets?
Yeah. Well, how do you justify any risk assessment to others? I mean, like, so this is where there's absolute beauty in using numbers, and I'll explain exactly why that is shortly. But as soon as you put numbers to things, people get sort of very questioning, right? One of the beauties of using numbers is if you can put a 0 in any of these. So if you can say that, for example, there is a 0 for exposure to intersection crashes, it doesn't matter how many, what the likelihood is or the severity, anything multiplied by 0 is 0, right? Same if you could put a 0 in severity of intersection crash. So you've got speed way down. You know, you've done all these features to bring speeds down. You don't actually care how many are exposed to it and what the likelihood of crash is, because any crash that happens is not going to result in death or serious injury. Now, you know, I mean, then put a disclaimer on that. If you've got a 4 and a 4, a 4 and a 4 and a 0, you're going to have like little bingles all the time, lots of bingles. So you might want to do something about reducing the likelihood. But from a pure safe system perspective, that's okay. It's all about stopping death and serious injury. We're not particularly concerned if there's minor bingles, because it's about stopping death and serious injury. So that's the beauty of using numbers in one sense. The second beauty of using numbers is just powerful. It's powerful when you put down a safe system assessment. It has scores. It has a score out of 448, and it shows what it is. And you put that down, and you know, in the past, it's sort of like this road safety audit report where it's got, oh, this is, you know, high risk and some ideas, and it's a bit fluffier and a bit people. And then the SIDRA report comes in, and it's boom, and tables and numbers, and, you know, people are like, oh, I'm not going to question that. But this one, no, do you really think? You know, so we've got, it puts us with a bit more oomph in it. I mean, the SIDRA report's got assumptions in there, and people, oh, yeah, you know, I assume this, and I didn't get data on this, so I've made this assumption, I've tweaked that. So the modelers are making, you know, judgments and things like that. There's a bit more refined than this, but really, you know, if you're doing an occupational health and safety risk assessment or whatever risk assessment, you've got to use professional judgment in making a call on that. And how do you justify that you've decided it's high risk? Well, you justify it by this documentation, putting in, here's the reasons why we've arrived at this risk score. So that, in a sense, that's how you're justifying it. Now, all of that being said, we are working with the Victorian government at the moment on a tool that you can put in a whole lot of these variables, and it gives you at least a starting score for all of these. And then it's over to you to tweak it based on the absolute nuances of specific sites that we can never integrate into any model, because it's too, you know, there's infinite scenarios out there to try to nut out. But we can at least sort of bring you into, say, it's going to be somewhere in the order of 3 or 4, and then you go and look at it there and you go, oh, actually it's a 3, or I might even, you know, in extreme situations dump down or 2. Anyway, that'll come out at some point. There's a bit more work to be done on that, but we're starting to, we've got some prototypes of that running at the moment to try and get that consistency.
Thanks, Ken. You've convinced me. Should we have a break now? We're at 10 minutes past, just about.
Yeah, you said that like it was a participant's question.
Oh, did I? Yeah. The
You're like you were
participants.
reading it.
Yes. See, they're on my side.
Yeah, all right.
Well done, team.
Let's take 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Time there. Made a mess of this slide. So we will go through a little bit of an example, and then Kathy, hopefully we will have the learning management system and we'll show people how to do that assignment after I'm done. Keep the questions coming in though. So we've been using the scoring reference sheet there. Okay, so let's have a look. We've got an existing intersection and you can see it there. It's a giveaway controlled intersection. It's on a sort of sweeping bend. It's got some power poles. What else there? A bit of footpath over there. It's got some guideposts, some edge line, trees, other bits and pieces. And they're planning to build maybe a roundabout at that location. And there's a bit of a design done, and that's a fairly nice level of detail in the design for safe system assessing. They haven't spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on design work, so they're probably willing to change and adjust and do things quite easily. So they've got that idea. They've also got an idea there of a signalized intersection of some description there as a different option. And they've also got an idea of another signalized intersection of a conventional T intersection with a slip lane there and some crossing points. Okay, so we've got the existing conditions and we've got 3 design options. So you do the existing conditions first, and this is a sort of simplified matrix. Often you'd have a bit more detail than this, and I may even, if we have time, show you a real one, which is, might go over multiple pages in terms of dot points on what you're coming at. But exposure, don't worry if you can't read the detail here, but it's sort of just saying what the traffic volume is and then giving a score out of 4. What's the traffic volume, score, what's the prediction on pedestrians, and a score. Then likelihood, and you can see here some dot points, and the dot points are broken up into what increases the likelihood of crash in the existing conditions and what decreases the likelihood of crash in the existing conditions. And so dot pointing out some different things that increase. So maybe the speed's high and there's no sealed shoulders and this and that. But the other things are, well, there's edge lines and there's delineation and there's lighting and the like. And we've ended up coming into a score of, in this case, 2.5. Now, that brings up an important point. And the reason we put a 0.5 in there is to remind me to talk about this. You saw the scores were between 0 and 4, and the scoring reference sheet was 1, 2, 3, 4. There was no 0.5. There was no decimal places. When we were in the working group for the Austroads project, developing the Safe System Assessment Framework and numbers were put up, there's a few of us who said, we're going to give this to technical people. They are going to just run this off a cliff with, sort of decimal places. And anyway, lo and behold, after it was released, and then not too long after, we sort of started seeing scores coming in with 2 and 3 decimal places, and these scores of 16.357, and you've just seen how we arrive at these likelihood scores and the severity scores. So the precision is not there to be making those very, very precise calls. This is a broad brush assessment technique. However, if you absolutely must, you can go to a 0.5. And that, or again, that's a Victorian and South Australian and general model that's been accepted. It doesn't clarify this at all in the Austroads document. If you must go, not to go to more decimal, more precision than a half. And why would you go to that? Well, it really often comes up because your team can't agree between a 2 and a 3. The 2 and a 3 seems to be the particular one people can't agree on because of the way it's set up in the scoring reference sheet. And so you end up maybe compromising at a 0.5. So anyway, you've dot pointed all of that, you've justified it. Then you go, okay, severity of crash. And maybe you're thinking and putting in what is the tolerable score as a little bit of commentary to give a reference there so people know that. And then what increases the severity of crash and what decreases the severity of crash, few dot points and a call on that, and then you score. And you go through and you do this for each of them. Dot points, increases, decreases, increases, decreases, and you get your score and then your final score. So that's the existing conditions, and you make sure you're happy with that. That's what's currently there. Then you select the whole table or the whole matrix, copy it, paste it with all its words and all its numbers. You look at your first design and say your first design was that roundabout that they had a design for. And then you go through and you say, well, what, when they build that roundabout, still remains there, and what has been removed, and what is new that has come in as a factor. Now you see in this one, none of the exposures changed because the same number of vehicles coming in, same number of pedestrians crossing, same number of cyclists and the like. There's been no assumption that that's going to fundamentally change traffic flow or volume or anything like that. Things in the likelihood have changed. And what you do when you're filling out the matrix is you cross out, you use the strike through function in Word, and you strike through things that are no longer present because the roundabout's been built. And anything new you put in red, you add dot points. You're striking through bits, you're adding new things in red or another color, and then you're changing the score and you make it a different color if it's changed. And then you go and you do this for each one. You do it then also for the severity of crash and add things, new things, cross things out, and come out with your new score. You do that then for the roundabout. Then you go back and you get the existing conditions, you copy it again, paste it, and manipulate it for your next design. Cross bits out, you do that. You come out with your next design, your new scores for your next design. And you do that again for the third design. And if they give you 50 designs, you do it 50 times, right? So you just keep producing this. And then you take all of that and you're able to then start to compare. You will have scores out of 448 for all of them. So you can, at a very high level, say, well, the existing conditions was 118.5, the roundabouts a score of 90, 99 for the modified T signalized intersection, 105 for the conventional T. At a very high level with your existing designs that you've got, your roundabout's going to give you highest alignment with safe system principles. Every design you've got improves alignment with safe system principles compared to the existing conditions. But that roundabout is your highest alignment with safe system principles. And then you might graph it like this, and you will graph it like this because that's what people want to see. That's the convention. It's how we're doing things now, and you produce that graph, and it shows, yep, okay, I can see why the roundabout's performing well, although actually the roundabout here, it's increasing cyclists, so we're getting good gains across other areas, but we might need to have a think about that. So you've done all that, you've come up with scores. And now for every one of these options, you come up with ideas that they could put into that design to make it better. Get this score down. Each of these scores can be less. How? And it might be the roundabout. You're saying, well, let's provide separated facilities for cyclists, or let's do some motorcycle-friendly signage systems around because those are fixed hazards, or let's add some barrier around this bit because runoff roadways. The signals, you might be saying, well, let's raise the intersection. Let's add some lighting here. Let's add a mast arm. Let's do LED lighting. It's probably going to be stock standard in a new signal, but these sorts of, you're coming up with ideas to try to bring this score down if they want to take these on. And for each of those ideas that you've come up with that improves their design, you categorize them. You categorize them into one of these two, primary or supporting. Now, primary treatments are anything that virtually eliminates the potential for fatal or serious injury crash occurring associated with the foreseeable crash type that you're particularly thinking about. And a supporting one doesn't virtually eliminate that crash, death and serious injury crash potential, but it certainly helps out, lessens the chance it's going to happen or the like. So this is a pretty tough thing for people to get their head around that are new to it. But I do have some sort of tips here. Like, a primary treatment doesn't necessarily mean you've completely eliminated the chance of the crash. It means that the severity of the crash, if it does occur, is within these tolerable limits. So, and you're understanding human behavior and human failure and humans making mistakes. So you're really going to have to bring the severity of the crash down within those tolerable levels for it to be a primary treatment. And that's why we call some categories of things we generally would call primary treatments are things like roundabouts for intersection crashes for passenger vehicles, raised pedestrian crossings for pedestrians where you've got speeds down very low, continuous wire rope safety barrier systems for passenger vehicle runoff road crashes, and these sorts of things. And there's actually a nice bit of the Austrade Safe System Assessment Framework that just lists a whole lot of treatments and tells you whether they're primary or supporting. And so you can start to calibrate your thinking in what are primary and what are supporting treatments. Now, I put the definition of a non-safe system treatment in here just for reference. You wouldn't be recommending anything that is non-safe system as such, but that's anything that's going to increase death and serious injury, or is going to actively hamper your ability to improve things into the future. So probably when we get to giving you the assignment and showing you things, we can show you where in the Austrade's framework you can find some of that. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or comments, Kathy, and then I'll just show this last little bit before we jump into giving people their assignment.
Thanks, Ken. Does the primary treatment need to receive a score of 0?
It's a good question. It probably won't receive a score of 0. It may receive a score of 0 for that particular crash type that you're particularly concerned about, but it'll be a very low score. Now, this is where we sort of, it's virtually eliminate, first of all, but this is where I talk about that safe system spectrum and the scoring. Like, I've done hundreds of these things, and no project has ever got a total score of 0. Okay, but no project's ever got a total score of 448 either. It's all this sort of spectrum, and it's actually all about us pushing down and pushing towards 0. Nice little marketing there for towards 0 and pushing us towards that score of 0 and doing it in a thoughtful way to get the biggest drops down we possibly can. I think that a lot of the stuff is we don't actually know how to get zeros in some of these. And we need to innovate, and we need to do new things, and we need to come up with ideas and the like. But yeah, so I hope that sort of answers that.
Thanks, Ken. That's all for the minute. So yeah, keep your questions coming in. It's good.
So you remember there that I said the score, the matrix is the meat of the assessment, but there's also other stuff within the assessment that we do. So we make recommendations, but there's also this other part of a safe system assessment. We're not going to make you do this for your assignment, but you will do it as part of full safe system assessments out there in the real world. And it's to come up with qualitative, so non-scoring based, qualitative answers to these questions. These questions are in the Australian Safe System Assessment Framework, and you put them into your safe system assessment and you make written commentary and dot points and things around them. And they cover off these elements of road user, vehicle, post-crash care. And the questions, a lot of them you might go, this is an irrelevant question to what I'm doing. That's okay. Okay. But some of them may trigger thoughts, and they may trigger thoughts on alterations to your scoring. They may trigger thoughts on other things that can be done that improve our alignment with safe system principles, improve road safety, that may not be just in our traditional pouring of concrete and putting up barriers and traffic signals and signs and all of that. Okay? So let's have a look quickly at these questions. Are road users likely to be alert and compliant? And are there factors that might influence this? What are the expected compliance and enforcement levels? Drugs, alcohol, road rules, driving. What is the likelihood of driving fatigue? Can enforcement activities be conducted safely? It's an interesting one. That one actually plays out in an interesting way in a lot of safe system assessments and different projects that we do. Actually, there's been some really wonderful wins out of safe system assessments, great case studies out there where this question is asked and then there's interaction with the highway patrol and enforcement agencies and how this is going to impact on it. And one example that stands out to me, which was a big sort of $103 million duplication of a road, and this in the safe system assessment and the nutting out of the project, and the highway patrol were consulted with and said, you know, how is this going to impact on your ability to do enforcement? And I'm like, oh, well, you're now proposing all these continuous barriers and we don't really, it's hard to pull over people there and we don't do that. And our protocol says we can't for these reasons and that. And it'd be great to have somewhere that we could put the booze bus, but there's nothing really there. And then, you know, just looking around, oh, there's an old stack site here and yeah, we could utilize that area. And back to the project, you know, the safe system assessment then said, might be worth investigating whether that stack site, and by stack site, for those who don't know that term, that's where you just like store your aggregate and stuff when you're doing stacking up stuff, I suppose, is why it's got a stack site, not like a stack as in a crash. It's a, somebody's probably got a great definition of a stack site. It's a sort of common road authority term, but it's essentially just a cleared area on the roadside where you're going to you utilize stuff. Anyway, so you know, the safe system assessment said, based on after this question and some discussion with it, what about looking at the possibility of, you know, having that area as an area where some enforcement could happen? And even the possibility of just further up here, a little maintenance gap design between the barriers designed where a number plate recognition vehicle could also fit, and they need these sort of requirements. And so then that ended up getting built into this project for almost no extra cost in the scheme of that project, like minuscule, tiny little extra bit when they're doing all of that work. But what it's meant is that there's this ability for them to have essentially a purpose-built enforcement bay and a number plate recognition vehicle up the road, so that vehicles can go past and take their number plate, run it, it automatically gets run through the system. It flags, they radio down, they go, yep, pick up that purple ute, and they flag them in and get them on their, well, it's more than just road safety often, but get them on their warrants and those sort of things. But unregistered vehicles, but they can also bring in whichever cars they want, booze bus, and it's actually protected by a bit of barrier system. That's pretty good holistic system thinking about road safety, isn't it? Whereas, and that came out of this safe system assessment questioning. Can this be done? And there's a lot of them where you come up with these ideas and those sort of things, and then can't eventuate for one reason or another, but at least somebody's doing this thinking. Are there special road users, entertainment precinct, elderly children, online activities, distraction by environmental factors, big flashing LED signs and variable messages and the like? Then we go into the vehicles. What is the level of alignment with the ideals of safer vehicles is a very broad, generic question. And actually that one is kind of in there for if you wanted to do a safe system assessment of an entire community or a mine operation or something that is, it doesn't quite work for individual intersection assessments or lengths of road because but if you're doing, the scalability of this methodology means that you could say there's a remote community, I'm going to do a safe system assessment holistically on that. And then you would look at what are their vehicles, what are the safety features in their vehicles, what's the fleet, and the like. Are there factors that might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles? Is the percentage of heavy vehicles too high for the design? Are there resources to detect non-roadworthy, overloaded, unregistered vehicles? Can enforcement of those activities be conducted safely in terms of vehicle weigh stations and those sort of things? Has vehicle breakdown been catered for? And then post-crash care. Are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury, so congestion, stopping access, stopping space? Motorways, that one often comes up, and projects where they're going to take the shoulder or the emergency lane and use it as a running lane and those sorts of things. Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently and rapidly as possible? An interesting one to think about. Some good examples out of safe system assessments associated with things like areas where it takes hours for emergency services to get to injured parties. I was thinking some popular motorcycle touring routes in New Zealand up in the mountains, and there was just taking forever for emergency services to get there, and there was nowhere the emergency helicopter could land. And so the project, along with all these motorcycle upgrade and to the barriers and signs and lines and things like that, built some helicopter landing areas and just cleared some areas and created that so there was space to actually do that rather than having to drive, take 2 hours to get up there and then all the issues associated with congestion and all of that. So thinking outside of just our usual. Our drivers provided the correct information to address travel speeds on the approach to an adjacent to an incident. Yeah, sometimes, a lot of the time you go, well, not really applicable, or it's all fine, there's nothing specific here, but maybe a motorway again or a tunnel or something, you might be thinking, oh, how's that all going to work? Is there reliable information via radio, BMS? Is there a provision for e-safety, which is electronic safety features, such as cooperative ITS and the like? That question's a real sort of question of the future one, and really doesn't play out much in most intersection design or upgrade design. But if you're doing a big safe system assessment on a big new road and thinking, oh, well, it's going to be in there for the next 50 years, and what are the vehicles of that? time going to be doing, and has it got good comms and systems available, and is their vehicle to infrastructure consideration and comms, and a whole lot of weird wild thinking. You might even on a big project want to get advice from others who have specialist knowledge in those areas and try and just generally think about it. So they're the sort of questions, and you just write answers and dot points, or maybe not applicable, and thoughts, and some may feed into some ideas on improvements or things that inject into the project. And that's the safe system assessment. So you're then going to write up the report, and the report, I used to spend a bit of time on this slide saying what should go in and what shouldn't, but now quite a few jurisdictions have released templates that you just use, and so everybody's consistent with listing, the team members, the inspection times, the description of the project, and the context, the matrix, and the graphs, and those sort of things. So we're going to give you a template to use, and the template is the Victorian government's template, and it clearly says in there on their website and everything that please use this, copy it, rebrand it, put your own branding on it, just use the same damn headings and format and everything like that, so we all produce consistent safe system assessments. And that's what we're going to give you for your little exercise. And we're going to take you through this very shortly. Kathy will sort of do it live in Learning Management System, so you see how you can do it, and you'll be able to follow the steps. But what you'll see there are some highlighted sections which you're going to fill out. You're going to get that actual template in Word, you're going to use it, you're going to manipulate it, and you're going to work through it. But before we jump into that, I want to give you the site safety briefing and say that you are going to go out to a site. We've selected the site near your house or your office or whatever address you gave us. But we've also had a look to ensure that it's a low risk from a occupational health and safety and your ability to inspect it safely. There's going to be good places to park or to stand at or walk, easy to walk to, that you don't need to be in live traffic and you don't need to be putting yourself in danger. We want you, in fact, we require you to wear a high visibility vest, and you all should have that by now. And we need you to stay off the road. It's not about, measuring lane widths or putting your head down to look at the drainage crosswall and these sorts of things. It's about just observing how the site operates and how it interacts, and looking at your design and imagining it built and how that would operate. Don't be a hazard yourself. So don't make people walk into traffic to get around you. Park safely. Don't make it so you're parking so people, blocking sight lines or making cyclists, go around you into the road. And we do have a safe work method statement, which you're going to have to read and agree to, which is pretty obvious stuff, like don't go out there intoxicated, and if you have to drive more than 5 hours or 3 hours, have a rest. But none of you have to drive more than 3 hours to get to your site, because we've selected it near you. And if you did have to, then just tell us and we'll get you a site that's closer to you. But like common sense stuff like that. But we want you to assure us that you're going to take responsibility for safety, and we've assessed it and we've given you a safe way that hopefully you can do this in a reasonable manner. Now, Kathy, it looks like we've got a hand up there.
Oh, so we do. I think it's Paul.
G'day, Paul. Hopefully you can unmute yourself now. If you wanted to talk to us, it might be an accident. Is it an accidental hand up? You'll have to unmute yourself if you did want to talk. No? Okay. Oh, here we go. Oh. No.
Put his hand back down.
Yeah.
That's okay. We get very excited when there's an accidental hand up, don't we?
Yeah, we love chatting to people live. Any other questions coming in there? Or do they just want you to show them what to do live?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see how this goes. Who knows what you're going to see on my screen? Probably not what you're supposed to. Here we go. Good question. When is the homework due? It's due in exactly 2 weeks' time. So where we are now is in module 4. So this bit here. There is a short quiz for this module. There is that safe work method statement that Ken mentioned in there, and an agreement. It's just a tick that yes, you will not be intoxicated and you will do the right thing when you're out there. Now, your sites are in here, which you've hopefully had a look at, and this is the template that Ken was talking about that you need to fill in. So we'll just bring that one up.
Yeah, so you've got a site in there, and then there's a Word document and an Excel document you're going to be using. So very good, there it is. And okay, so you can see it says highlighted stuff is what you're going to fill out. And crossed out stuff, don't worry about it, because we're not wasting your time. We crossed out some stuff to just keep it efficient. Okay. Who are you is what we want to know. Whose assignment is this? Now, it does say assessment team there. And if there was somebody else that had your site and you wanted to do this with them and do a bit of a team effort on this, we are okay with that. However, we need you then to put both of your names, or 3 of your names, I suppose, in there, okay? We need to know that this was done as a team and like. Now, most of you probably would be doing this on your own because you've got your own sites, but that is a possibility. But I don't, yeah, if we see 2 exactly identical and we haven't worked out that there was a team working on this, we'll be suspicious. So none of that. Okay, proposed works. So you're going to give us a little bit of background on, okay, what is it? So there's this design that you've been given. Just briefly tell us what they're planning to do. You put a snip of the design in there is probably going to be an easy way to do it. Yeah, but I don't want pages in there. You're not going to get extra marks by putting lots and lots and lots of detail about what's happening. Just put enough in there to show that you know what's happening. And yeah, maybe a snip of the design would be good. Assessment summary, you sort of do after you've done your assessment, and then you just a very brief, okay, this is where the scores have landed. These are the high risk areas and the like. And you put your scores in and you do a graph. But you're going to do this after you've done the matrices. And so here's the existing condition, okay? And so you're going to do this first. So yes, you've been given a site and a design, but the first thing you do is say, okay, I'm going to that intersection. I'm going to that spot. What's there now? And you assess that just the way I walked you through. Lots of dot points in there about likelihood and severity, factors influencing those, and scores, and fill it all out. Lots of dot point information, and score it all up, calculate it out, and then you get your end score. Then you're going to copy that once you're happy. Copy it. It's going to work for you, Kathy.
We're getting there. Yeah.
You're not in editing mode, but
no, that's the problem. It's a good start. Oh gosh. Showing you how not to do it. Let's run through that again. There we go.
Yeah, that's it. Now it should work. Copy that. And then you're going to, I'd go up a little bit onto the, I'd go onto the one above it. So you get a landscape. There you go. And you paste it, and you then you've connected the 2 tables. That's all right.
Yeah, I did.
Anyway, the point being, you paste it and you write there as a heading, design option, and then you do the strike throughs for any that were removed. You color them red, so maybe just highlight something and show where the strike through is for those who don't use that function. So there we go. And back on the home bit, there you go, nice little strike through. Color new things red, or red, there you go. Color your scores that change, all the scores that change should be colored. And then you produce this new score and new result. So you've got all of that, you've got scores, you've got good information in there of how you've arrived at that. And then you're going to want to make a graph of that and the like. Back here and put those scores. So you put the existing condition score and you put the other one. And we want you to do a graph, but again, just to make your life easier, we've prepared this little graph generator where you can put your scores in that you've decided on in there quickly, and it'll produce you a graph. You can do that for existing conditions and design options, and then just use the snipping tool or just copy the graph and then paste it in. So you'll get a nice little graph put into the Word document there. And you replace that with your own. Yeah, that's right. Then right down the bottom then is we're saying, well, for that design you were given, what could be improved? And it's not what could be improved in the existing conditions. It's what could be improved in the design. So you might say, add this features or change this or add lighting or whatever it is. And then you put some of those in primary if you want and some in supporting. And you've got to work out that categorization. So you can have lots of dot point, lots of ideas in there, or just a few ideas, but we do like to see a few ideas and we like to see some good stuff. The last thing you do down the bottom is you add one photo from the site, one photo, and that's of you at the site. Okay, so we don't want 20 site photos of all the bits and pieces. We just want to know that you went to this site and you looked at it, you observed it, you saw how it operated, you had to think about it. Going to the site is this sort of mandatory part of this course, so you gather an understanding of the importance of the site visit. Okay, so that's what we want. Then PDF it and upload it. I like PDFs. We'll accept the Word document if you don't PDF it, but yeah, Alex is excited to take his selfie on site there. Okay, so I think that's that. Pop your questions in about the assignment and what you're being asked to do, but hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Yes.
Just a quick one. Those safe system assessment fact sheets, I've flicked it into the chat as well. However, the safe system assessment frame, oh, there it is. I knew it was open somewhere. Never mind. So this one here, a couple of things to have a look at here. Scrolling. Just tell me to slow down wherever you want. There was that one, that scoring.
Scoring reference sheet, but down down a bit further.
Here we go. We've got our treatments.
Yeah, so for each crash type, there's a table and it's got different possible treatments. And you can see there the green row are primary treatments. The next two rows, the yellow and the orange, are supporting. There used to be this theme of having supporting and supporting step words, but it's sort of now everybody just uses supporting. So those two fit together. Other considerations are, often within that, those qualitative questions that we ask and things you consider. But you can see there that you've categorized them like that. It also helps that tells you which is exposure, which is likelihood, which is severity influences. So, some things that are tripping some people up in this course can be answered by just having a look at these stuff. Now, there's not every treatment in there. I mean, there's things you'll come up with, ideas, other things that aren't there, new things. So just use it to get a bit of an idea, a bit of a flavour.
All right, we have some questions. Prize for the best site selfie. I love it. Yes.
The site selfie prize. Okay, let's do that.
I updated this document with your selfie in there, Ken. Has that come out? Did you take that out? I'll put it back.
Updated with? No, I didn't. I haven't touched anything.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll put in an example of a selfie of Ken on site, just in case people do. And you can always wear a hat. You don't have to get a haircut. Any other questions? It sounds like everybody is doing okay. If you have, the idea is that you get out and do the site visit in the next week. Hopefully it's not raining where you are, torrential rain. And what we do is come back with questions at our last session, which is next Thursday. So that's the idea of it. And then you can start writing up your report. Of course, if you want to get it in before the next session, that's awesome as well. However, they are due in 2 weeks' time, and then Ken will mark them, or someone from the team will mark them. And once that's done, you'll be able to get your certificate. We'll run through that in the next session as well. Just daytime, isn't it? Site visit, Ken, there's no nighttime inspection required. Yeah,
that's right. So in a safe system session in general, there's no sort of, not like a road safety audit where, nighttime is mandatory a lot of the time, or really strongly suggested a lot of the time. There's no real clarification of that. So daytime is usually done. Sometimes you do nighttime in ones, but for our purposes of this, in our risk assessment of it, we elected that nobody goes out there at night for the training exercise. So no nighttime inspections, please.
Lovely. And get in touch if you've got any questions, if not sure what your design is saying, those sorts of things. Please get in touch with us.
Yeah, I'm happy to do a little one-on-one coaching sessions if you're struggling with bits of it, or you've got particular questions. Be great if you bring some of those to next session so everybody can hear them as well. Often if you're having trouble getting your head around something, others will probably be having trouble with that. So, but enjoy it. It's great fun. Get stuck into it. Nothing like getting out to a real site, having a look at stuff, and enjoy. And we look forward to seeing you in 1 week's time.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Bye.